I knew something was terrible the moment the bank teller's face changed. Her professional smile froze, then melted into something that looked uncomfortably like pity. I'd come in that Tuesday morning ready to finally pay my certification tuition, the accounting program I'd been postponing for 3 long years. The check sat in my purse, already filled out. All I needed was a simple transfer from our joint savings account to my personal checking. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said softly, her eyes flicking between her computer screen and my face. "I'm going to need just a moment, please." Behind me in line, someone coughed impatiently. A mother with 2 restless children shifted her weight from foot to foot. I felt heat crawling up my neck, that horrible sensation of being watched during a private humiliation. The teller picked up her phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. When she hung up, she printed out a statement and slid it across the marble counter like the paper itself might burn her fingers. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Caldwell," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "The account is showing a 0 balance." I stared at the crisp white paper. Row after row of transactions, all time-stamped from early that morning, before dawn had even broken. Every single dollar methodically transferred out. The name on each transaction made my stomach drop. Julian Caldwell. My husband. The final line showed where everything had gone. KC Holdings LLC. I'd never heard that name in my entire life. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned bone white. The bank statement sat on the passenger seat beside me, those neat rows of numbers mocking everything I'd believed about my marriage. $15,000. Our entire savings. Gone in minutes while I'd been sleeping. When I pushed through our front door, Julian stood in the kitchen casually making his morning coffee. He glanced up with that easy smile, like this was just another ordinary Tuesday morning in our life together. "Hey babe," he said lightly. "You're back earlier than I expected." I held up the crumpled statement, my hand visibly shaking. "What is this, Julian?" He barely looked at the paper. "What's what?" "The savings account." "Account. It's completely empty." He stirred his coffee slowly, the silver spoon clinking rhythmically against the ceramic mug. He didn't seem surprised or concerned at all. "Oh, that," he said, his tone dismissive. "Yeah, I moved my money this morning. No big deal." My mouth opened but no sound came out. I just stood there, frozen. "Relax, Amara," he continued, actually smirking slightly. "It's just a business thing I'm working on. You wouldn't really understand all the technical details anyway." The casual dismissiveness in his voice cut deeper than the actual betrayal. He wasn't even pretending to care about my reaction. "That was our money," I whispered, my voice cracking. "For my school." Julian took a long sip of his coffee and shrugged his shoulders. "Honestly, you don't really need school anyway, Amara. You've got everything you need right here at home." I locked myself in the bathroom and sank down onto the cold tile floor, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. Tears came first, hot and angry, streaming down my face. But then something else settled in behind the hurt. Something colder. Something like clarity, sharp and focused. I sat there thinking about the past 6 months, really thinking about them for the first time. The late-night phone calls Julian always took outside in his car. Those increasingly frequent business trips to cities I'd never heard him mention before. The mysterious receipts I'd found tucked in his pockets and questioned, only to be told I was overthinking things, being paranoid, imagining problems. All those times he'd called me crazy for asking questions. All those times I'd actually believed him and apologized for doubting. I opened the cabinet under the bathroom sink and pulled out the old shoebox I'd hidden there months ago, pushed far back behind the cleaning supplies. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, credit card bills I'd found strange, and a handful of receipts that never quite made sense. I'd started collecting them without really understanding why, just following some instinct I couldn't name. Now I understood perfectly. I spread all the papers across the bathroom floor in front of me and started reading through them carefully. My hands gradually stopped shaking. My breathing slowly became steadier and more controlled. Something fundamental shifted inside me in that moment. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was preparation for war. I spent the next 2 full days cross-checking every single financial statement I could find while Julian was at work. I had the house completely to myself, so I laid everything out systematically across our dining room table like a detective assembling evidence for a major case. KC Holdings LLC appeared over and over throughout the statements. Small transfers at first, just 500 here, maybe 1,000 there. Then the amounts grew progressively larger and more frequent. The pattern stretched back at least 4 full months, maybe longer. This wasn't some impulsive mistake or momentary lapse in judgment. This was carefully planned, methodically executed. Then I found another statement I'd somehow missed before, buried deep in the back of Julian's desk drawer. This one had a transaction memo that made my blood run cold. Final transfer before separation. My stomach dropped hard. Separation. The word echoed in my mind. He'd been actively planning to leave me. Not just thinking about it casually, but actually planning it out step by step. And he'd been systematically moving our money, hiding it away where I couldn't access it, so when he finally left I'd have absolutely nothing. I methodically took photos of every single page with my phone, uploaded them all to a cloud storage account Julian didn't even know existed, then carefully put all the physical originals back exactly where I'd found them. Then I walked into the kitchen and calmly made dinner, acting like absolutely nothing in our world had changed. That night I lay in bed pretending to sleep, my eyes closed but my mind racing. Julian stayed up late in the living room, and sometime around midnight I heard him speaking quietly on his phone. I carefully crept down the dark hallway and pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath, listening to every word. "Once the account reaches the target goal, I'm completely done," he said in a low voice. 2 more weeks, maybe 3 at most. Then I'll file the papers, and she won't see any of it coming. My heart pounded so violently I was certain he'd hear it echoing down the hallway. "She's totally clueless about everything," he continued, a hint of cruel amusement in his voice. "Doesn't even bother checking the bank statements anymore. Makes it almost too easy." I pressed my back harder against the wall, barely daring to breathe at all. Then the floorboard directly beneath my foot suddenly creaked loudly in the silence. Julian stopped talking mid-sentence. I heard him stand up quickly, chair scraping. "I'll call you back later," he whispered urgently into the phone. Heavy footsteps moved deliberately toward the hallway where I stood frozen. I turned and ran silently back to our bedroom, dove under the covers, and squeezed my eyes tightly shut just as the door swung open. Julian stood in the doorway for what felt like forever, just watching me lie there. Then he quietly pulled the door closed again. The next morning over breakfast, Julian suddenly accused me of spying on him the night before. "You were listening to my phone call last night," he said sharply, his eyes studying my face carefully for any reaction. "I was sound asleep, Julian," I lied smoothly, keeping my voice perfectly steady and my expression neutral. "Don't play stupid games with me, Amara. I know you better than that." He reached across the breakfast table and grabbed my hand, but the gesture wasn't affectionate at all. It was possessive, controlling, almost threatening. "You're being paranoid again," he said in that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "It's really not healthy behavior. Maybe you should talk to someone about it." I carefully pulled my hand back from his grip. "I'm not being paranoid, Julian." He smiled, but the warmth never reached his cold eyes. "Sure you're not, babe. Whatever helps you sleep." Later that morning, while Julian was in the shower, I quietly tried accessing his phone. New passcode. For years I'd been able to guess all his passwords easily, birthdays and anniversaries and simple number patterns. But now nothing worked at all. He was systematically locking me out of everything in our life. I heard the shower water shut off abruptly. I set his phone down exactly where I'd found it and walked calmly out of the bedroom. If he wanted to play games, I could play them better. I started carefully following Julian, not every single day but just enough to identify clear patterns in his behavior. On Thursday afternoon, Julian mentioned casually that he had an important business meeting downtown and would be gone a few hours. I waited exactly 5 minutes after he left, then got in my car and followed him at a safe distance. He parked outside a small cafe I'd never seen before, tucked away on a quiet side street. A well-dressed man in an expensive tailored suit met him at a corner table near the back. They spoke quietly with their heads close together, clearly not wanting to be overheard. Then Julian reached into his leather bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sliding it smoothly across the table. The man opened it carefully, scanned whatever contents were inside, and nodded his approval. I quickly pulled out my phone and snapped a clear photo just as Julian suddenly turned his head toward the window. For one frozen second, our eyes met directly through the cafe's front window. I immediately ducked down behind my steering wheel, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. When I finally gathered the courage to look up again, Julian was standing and walking deliberately toward the cafe door. I started my car and drove away as fast as I could without drawing attention, my hands trembling violently on the wheel. The very next morning I called a divorce lawyer's office from my car. I told the receptionist carefully that I was asking general questions for a friend who was in trouble. She scheduled an appointment for me anyway. The lawyer's name was Bryn Hale. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened to my entire story without interrupting once, taking careful notes the whole time. When I finally finished explaining everything, she leaned back thoughtfully in her expensive leather chair. "Asset hiding within a marriage is completely illegal," she said firmly. "Especially when it's done with clear intent to defraud a spouse. If your husband is deliberately moving money to hide it from you before filing for divorce, that's textbook financial fraud." Hearing another person, especially a legal professional, say it out loud somehow made everything feel terrifyingly real. "What exactly should I do now?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Document absolutely everything you can find," Bryn said seriously. "Bank statements, emails, text messages, photographs, anything at all that clearly shows his intent to conceal marital assets from you." I nodded slowly, feeling stronger and more capable than I had in weeks. "Now tell me more specific details about this mysterious LLC," Bryn continued, pulling out a fresh legal notepad. I gave her the exact name, KC Holdings LLC. She wrote it down carefully and looked up at me. "We'll need to trace the company thoroughly. If he's listed as the owner, we can file to freeze those accounts completely." My chest suddenly tightened with something that felt remarkably like hope. I spent countless hours that week searching through public business records online, following every digital trail I could find. KC Holdings LLC had been officially registered exactly 6 months earlier. The sole registered owner listed on all documents, Julian Caldwell. I stared at my computer screen, feeling completely numb inside. 6 full months. He'd been planning this betrayal for half a year while sleeping beside me every night. Then I discovered something even worse. A second LLC, registered to the exact same business address as the first one. Different company name. Keystone Ventures LLC. I clicked methodically through all the filing documents available. Same owner name. Same registration date. Same registered agent. Julian hadn't just hidden some money from me. He'd built an entire elaborate financial structure I knew absolutely nothing about, a whole secret business life. I carefully printed out every single document I could find and added them all to my steadily growing evidence file. Julian came home that evening actually whistling cheerfully. He kissed my forehead gently like absolutely nothing was wrong between us. I smiled back warmly and asked pleasant questions about his day. He had absolutely no idea I was now 3 full steps ahead of him. The explosion happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Julian suddenly started accusing me of being ungrateful, of never appreciating anything he provided for our household. His voice rose steadily until he was actually shouting at me. "You don't contribute anything real to this marriage, Amara. You just take and never give anything back." I stood there silently, just letting him vent all his manufactured rage. Maybe I need a serious break, he finally said, his voice going dangerously quiet. A break from all this. From you. I'd already turned on my phone's voice recorder before even responding to him. A break from our marriage? I asked calmly, needing him to say it clearly on tape. Maybe so. I haven't decided yet. Is this because you've been secretly moving all our money into hidden accounts I'm not supposed to know about? His face instantly went completely white. What are you talking about? KC Holdings LLC. Keystone Ventures LLC. Should I keep going with more names? He just stared at me, apparently speechless for once. I kept my phone recording as he fumbled desperately for words, as he accused me again of being paranoid and crazy, as he tried skillfully to twist the entire conversation back around onto me somehow. Every single word was being saved as evidence. Something fundamental changed deep inside me that night. I completely stopped crying over him. I stopped begging him for basic honesty. I just watched him quietly, staying calm and controlled. It frightened him far more than any of my tears ever had. What's wrong with you lately? He demanded, clearly unnerved by my sudden change. Nothing at all, I said evenly. I'm perfectly fine. I stopped confronting him about anything. Stopped asking any probing questions. I smiled pleasantly when he talked, nodded along when he explained things, acted exactly like the compliant wife he'd always believed I was. But late at night, while Julian slept peacefully beside me, I worked. I meticulously copied every single important document onto a USB drive and hid it carefully inside an old book on our shelf, a book Julian would never think to touch. I opened my own private bank account at a completely different branch across town. I stopped being Julian's victim and consciously became his opponent. And he never saw it coming. I tracked down Julian's former accountant, a man named Troy who'd been abruptly fired 3 months earlier. I found his contact information through LinkedIn and called him from a coffee shop far from our neighborhood. Mrs. Caldwell, he said cautiously when I introduced myself over the phone. I need to ask you something important, I said quietly. Completely off the record. He hesitated for a long moment, then sighed deeply. He fired me specifically because I kept asking too many questions he didn't want to answer. Questions about what exactly? About why he suddenly wanted complete privacy regarding his finances. He directly asked me to stop copying you on any account statements. My breath caught painfully in my throat. I told him that wasn't ethical behavior for me, Troy continued. He said he'd find someone else who understood discretion better. Do you still have any records from when you worked for him? I asked carefully. Long silence on the line. Then, I kept one file, just in case something like this ever happened. 2 hours later, Troy sent me an email with a single attachment labeled simply, Projected Exit Plan. I opened the file on my laptop with shaking hands, almost afraid of what I'd find inside. It was a detailed spreadsheet. Organized columns showing specific dates, exact amounts, and planned transfers. A complete timeline showing how Julian intended to systematically siphon money over 6 full months, building his hidden accounts until they reached a specific target amount, $25,000. The final entry was circled in red. File for divorce. The target date written there was exactly 2 weeks away from today. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, staring at those cold numbers, feeling ice spreading through my veins. He'd planned absolutely everything. When to leave, how much to take, how to make sure I'd have nothing left. I immediately forwarded the complete file to Bryn Hale with a simple message. Is this enough evidence? Her response came back within minutes. More than enough. Come see me tomorrow morning. Bryn carefully laid out all my options during our meeting. I could confront Julian again directly, or I could prepare everything silently and strike hard when he least expected it. I chose silence and strategy. I photocopied every single document twice. One complete set for Bryn's files, one set for myself. I opened a private bank account and quietly deposited the small inheritance my grandmother had left me years ago, money Julian didn't even know existed. I met with Bryn 3 more times over the next week, methodically building an airtight case piece by piece. You have more than enough evidence to freeze all his accounts, she told me during our final preparation meeting. All of them? Yes. Even the hidden ones. Every single account. The joint accounts, the LLCs, everything. I nodded slowly, feeling power settling into my bones. Then let's do it. When do you want to file? I thought carefully about Julian's timeline. His carefully planned schedule. 2 weeks until he planned to file first and leave me with nothing. As soon as he makes his next move, I said firmly. Julian came home Tuesday evening and casually announced he was going on a brief business trip. 4 days, he said. Go. The timing matched his exit plan perfectly. That's completely fine, I said, even helping him pack his suitcase. I'll miss you. He kissed me distractedly, his mind already clearly somewhere else. After he left for the airport, I opened his laptop, the one he always carelessly forgot to lock properly. I found a hotel confirmation email buried in his inbox. 1 room. 2 guests listed. I took a clear screenshot and immediately sent it to Bryn. He's meeting someone there, I wrote. Her response came instantly. Then we move now. Today. Bryn filed all the emergency injunctions while Julian was safely in Chicago. The court carefully reviewed our extensive evidence. The secret LLC companies, the systematic transfers, the detailed exit plan, the hotel reservation for 2. A judge signed the official order that same afternoon. Every single account under Julian's name was immediately frozen. KC Holdings, Keystone Ventures, even his personal checking account. I was home organizing dinner when Julian called. His voice high and panicked. Amara, did you do something to my accounts? I kept my voice perfectly steady and calm. What do you mean? My accounts, they're all frozen. Every single one. I can't access anything. Oh, I said calmly. You should probably check your email then. Dead silence on the line. Then I heard him cursing loudly. You filed for divorce. Yes, I did. You can't do this to me. I already did, Julian. He hung up abruptly. 10 minutes later, I heard his car screeching into our driveway. Julian burst violently through the front door. His face bright red. His hands shaking with rage. What the hell did you do, Amara? I stood calmly in the kitchen, my arms crossed, completely composed. I protected myself and our assets. You froze my bank accounts. Our accounts, I corrected quietly. The ones you tried to hide from me. He stared at me like I'd suddenly become a complete stranger. I walked slowly to the dining table and laid out printed copies of everything. All the transfers, the LLC documents, the exit plan spreadsheet, the hotel reservation for 2 people. His face went deathly pale as he flipped through page after page. Where did you even get all this? Does it really matter now? He tried desperately to argue, to spin everything, to somehow make me the villain in this story. But the evidence was completely undeniable. I calmly slid the divorce papers across the table toward him. Sign them, I said. He didn't. The court hearing happened faster than I'd expected. Julian tried hard to charm the judge, flashing his practiced smile, carefully explaining that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding. The judge wasn't buying any of it. Bryn presented our evidence methodically and professionally. The secret accounts, the transfer timeline, the exit plan, the separation memo. Julian's expensive lawyer had absolutely nothing to counter with. The judge looked directly at Julian with clear disapproval written across her face. Mr. Caldwell, asset concealment in a marriage is an extremely serious legal matter. I'm ordering a complete and thorough audit of all your finances. Julian's face drained of all remaining color. All accounts, all LLC entities, everything, the judge continued firmly. I sat quietly with my hands folded, watching justice finally unfold. The full audit took 3 long weeks. What the investigators found shocked even me, and I'd thought I knew everything. Julian had opened 4 additional credit lines I'd never known existed. 2 more LLC companies registered in completely different states. A safety deposit box at another bank containing thousands in cash. He'd been far more thorough and deceptive than I'd ever imagined possible. But now everything was documented, exposed, frozen solid. Julian received official notice of substantial financial penalties for fraudulent concealment of marital assets. His lawyer tried desperately to negotiate reduced penalties, but the damage was already done. I sat across from Bryn in her quiet office, carefully reading through the complete audit results. "You're legally entitled to half of everything," she said, "including everything he tried to hide." I nodded slowly, still processing the full scope. "And the court is requiring him to reimburse you for the tuition money he prevented you from accessing." That detail felt like perfect poetry. Julian tried one final time to negotiate privately with me. He called late at night, his voice completely different now. "Muller. Desperate. Amara, please. We can settle all this quietly between ourselves." "No. I'll give you half of everything. We don't need the court involved anymore." "The court is already involved, Julian." "I made a terrible mistake," he said, and for the first time ever, he actually sounded desperate. "You made many mistakes," I replied evenly. "Can we just talk? Face to face? Please?" I thought about it seriously for a moment. Then I remembered that empty bank account, that dismissive smirk, that patronizing tone. "No, Julian. We're completely done talking." I hung up firmly. Bryn had been absolutely right. When you hold all the evidence, you hold all the power. The final hearing was surprisingly brief. Julian arrived looking thoroughly defeated, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear right up until we entered the courtroom. The judge carefully reviewed the settlement agreement. I would receive exactly half of all marital assets, including every dollar Julian had hidden. I would also receive full reimbursement for my tuition, plus additional compensation for emotional distress. Julian was ordered to pay substantial penalties for fraudulent asset concealment. The judge signed all the papers with a firm hand. It was finally over. I walked out of the courthouse into brilliant sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. Julian tried to catch up with me in the parking lot. "Amara, wait. Please." I stopped and turned to face him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I looked at him for one long moment. Then I got in my car and drove away. The settlement money hit my account 2 weeks later. Enough to pay for school. Enough to start completely over. Enough to finally breathe freely. I enrolled in the certification program that same day. The woman at the registration desk smiled warmly when I paid in full. "You must be so excited," she said kindly. "I really am." I found a small apartment across town, modest but bright, with large windows that let in beautiful morning light. I signed the lease and moved in with nothing but essentials. No painful memories. No heavy baggage. Just me. Julian's business partners started distancing themselves once word spread about the court case. His reputation crumbled quickly. I heard through mutual friends that the mysterious man from the cafe had disappeared entirely. I didn't gloat. I just moved steadily forward. Starting over felt strange at first. I'd spent so many years being Julian's wife that I'd completely forgotten what it felt like to just be Amara. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. I made new friends in my program. I studied late into the night not because I had to, but because I genuinely wanted to. I bought myself fresh flowers every single Friday. I learned to cook for one. I stopped checking my phone anxiously, constantly waiting for conflict. One quiet evening, my phone buzzed with a message. I almost ignored it, then saw it was from the bank. An automated notification. Julian had attempted to open a new account. The system automatically flagged him due to ongoing financial penalties. Smiled. Not out of spite. Out of relief. He couldn't run anymore. And I didn't have to chase. 6 months later, I graduated from my certification program. Top of my entire class. I wore a cap and gown and walked across a stage while strangers clapped. My mother was in the audience, openly crying happy tears. After the ceremony, she hugged me incredibly tight. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Thanks, Mom." "You did this yourself. All of it." I nodded, feeling the full weight of everything I'd survived. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and looked at my certificate. Amara Caldwell, Certified Public Accountant. I'd earned every single letter of that title. My phone buzzed again. Another bank notification. This time a deposit. My first paycheck from the accounting firm that hired me right after graduation. I smiled and raised my glass to the empty room. To new beginnings. Full year passed quietly. I bought better furniture. I adopted a sweet cat. I went on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but it felt good to be seen as myself again. Julian tried contacting me twice. Once through a mutual friend, once through a handwritten letter. I didn't respond to either attempt. There was nothing left to say. One afternoon, I was carefully reviewing a client's financial statements when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Ms. Caldwell?" A professional woman's voice said. "Yes. This is First National Bank. We're calling to inform you that an account under your former spouse's name attempted another withdrawal. Per court order, we're required to notify you." I thanked her politely and hung up. Julian was still trying. Still scheming. Still hiding. But it didn't matter anymore. His actions couldn't possibly touch me now. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and gold. He'd hidden money to escape me. But in the end, that's exactly what set me free. I'd taken control in a way he never saw coming. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With patience, evidence, and the kind of quiet power that doesn't need to shout. I was free. I was whole. I was finally completely mine. And that was the greatest victory of all.